Welcome back to PJ Takes 5. Today is Tuesday, August 12th, and the Chicago Cubs may officially be out of the NL Central race. But we start today by looking at a recap of the first weekend of NFL preseason action. Just throughout the weekend, I had a couple notes. I have 5 big takeaways I want to go through here, starting off with the Chicago Bears hometown team, and really just honing in on their defense, which I thought was the real star of the game on Sunday afternoon. Very few starters played on either side. Defensively, it was really just Tyreek Stevenson and Deshaun Wright at corner 1 and 2, both in competition for that cornerback 2 spot opposite Jalen Johnson. But besides that, it was really about the young guys. Austin Booker, second-year player, still super young, made a huge impact at the defensive end position. 3 sacks, 1 was a strip sack on the goal line to set up the offense with easy field position. And then Ruben Hippolyte, the rookie, and Noah Sewell, third-year player, were the 2 starting linebackers there who really left their prints on the game. So started off against Miami O on the first drive. They didn't really have all their starters, but Tua was in there, the running backs were in there, some of the O-line was in there. So it was a good, level of competition to go against there for this defense. And they kind of marched up and down the field on them, but when it got to the red zone, they really stiffened up and actually forced a fourth and goal stop on the 1 yard line. Noah Sewell shot a gap there and took the runner down for a loss on the goal line. So really impressive stuff from those young guys, and just the team this year, different from last year on the defense with Dennis Allen, is notching up the aggressiveness on the unit. A lot of press man with corners right at the line of scrimmage, a lot of 4-man fronts with the linebacker dropping down as a 5th man. So really just packing the line of scrimmage. Obviously not going to get too complex in a preseason game and give away all your stuff, but the tone from the game and then the joint practice on Friday before is just this defense is going to be super aggressive, and we're probably going to see that more and more as more starters and rotational players work into that unit throughout the preseason and obviously into the regular season. So the big kind of question mark is that DN spot opposite of Montez Sweat. Like I said, Booker definitely put a resume game together to make a pitch to earn that role. Dayo Odeyingbo also going to be competing for that spot. And I think it's interesting looking at the depth chart on the team website. They actually have 3 tackles listed as starters. So Andrew Billings at the nose tackle, and then both Grady Jarrett, who they signed, and Javon Dexter as 3 techs technically listed as starters. So that might mean that we see some Dexter flipping out to a base defensive end look and real heavy up front. But like I said, the theme for the Bears defense was just aggressive. And you saw that on the Dolphins' penultimate drive with Quinn Ewers in at quarterback. On a 4th down, Allen sent the blitz, and they got him down and set up the offense with pretty good field position to potentially go ahead and get a field goal. The offense couldn't convert, but definitely a change from last season under Eberflus, that kind of zone Tampa 2, bend don't break style. It's going to be a lot different this year, and I was really impressed with the aggressiveness from some of the guys who you might not expect to be full-time contributors coming in the fall. Number 2 here, I got a look at all the rookie quarterbacks. A lot of really good performances from these young guys. Just going down the draft order here, number 1 overall pick Cam Ward for the Titans, I thought had a really impressive outing. Started out with a 3 and out, but then led his team on a touchdown drive. They punched it in at the 1 yard line on the ground, but he finished the day 5 for 8, 67 yards. And I thought the only knock you could say was that he was maybe dropping back in the pocket a little too far. Not the tallest guy ever, but if you go back too far to get a better look on the defense, you're going to end up creating easier angles for edge rushers to collapse in on you. That might be a little teaching point that they would go with him, but overall I thought really good arm strength, a willingness to throw the ball over the middle to test the defense a little bit. So definitely that big, play potential out of the young quarterback there definitely came through. The other first-round pick, Jackson Dart for the Giants, had a pretty good game, 12 for 19, 154 yards and a touchdown. Also led the team with 24 rushing yards and just 3 carries. So his day was really highlighted by that go ball he threw for a touchdown. But Dable seemed to think really highly of him. Super efficient outing for Dart, and he seems to be kind of a player who can really perform within the system that he's looking for. Dable was a big part of kind of Josh Allen up to speed as an NFL quarterback. No, I'm not saying Dart's going to be Josh Allen. No quarterback's going to be Josh Allen for a while here, but definitely an impressive start for Dart, and he has the benefit of getting to sit behind Russell Wilson for, if not the majority of the season, at least the beginning, to ease into the NFL a little bit. So promising looks from him. And Tyler Shuck with the Saints, 2nd-round pick. He finished 15 for 22 with 165 yards, a touchdown and a pick. The pick was pretty bad. It resulted in a pick 6, but just the mental fortitude to come back right after that and lead a touchdown drive. He had that 54-yard touchdown. The dude was wide open, so it wasn't thread the needle situation, but just the mental wherewithal for a rookie, albeit 25, 26-year-old rookie, but to not be rattled like that and perform, I thought was pretty promising. So he's definitely in that competition to start down in New Orleans. Third round pick Jalen Milroe up in Seattle had a pretty good day too, 6 for 10 for 61 yards and tacked on 38 rushing yards as well. He's a little bit different just because he's a little bit more of a developmental quarterback. They got to do a little more with the pass game there, but he's in a unique spot where he doesn't have to start right away and they can still find a use for him in certain packages, maybe get to 4th and 1 on the goal line and you bring him in for a read option type situation or even an RPO kind of deal. So he's not going to take away too many snaps from Sam Darnold, I would expect, who didn't play during the first game there, but he's definitely going to have some packages throughout the season, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of ramp him up and get him comfortable in the NFL as well. The third round pick, Dylan Gabriel for the Browns, didn't play with a hamstring injury he's been nursing here, but out of Cleveland, the big quarterback story was Shedeur Sanders, who we all know, 5th round pick, kind of slid, even though the sliding in the draft is a little bit of a fake concept, but definitely went further down the board than people thought. He finished 14 for 23, with 138 yards and 2 touchdowns. Definitely a clean execution kind of style quarterback. He had a couple plays kind of make a little too much out of something, but it seems like the players really respond to him. I know there are clips with Myles Garrett and David Njoku hyping him up and talking to him on the sidelines. And the players always know. That's kind of the saying. The players know who's good and who has it. And the fact that the higher end players on that roster are gravitating towards Shedeur probably tells you a lot about the respect that he has in that locker room already. I thought it was a little weird that he came into a preseason game with the crew and the scythe and everything in the tunnel, but if that's what he has to do to get ready for a game, so be it. Who am I to judge? But definitely an impressive outing for him. There was talk about him potentially being set up for failure there, and I didn't quite see it that way. The Browns don't really have a lot of offensive talent to work with in general, but he definitely showed the flashes that they want to see and that constant quarterback carousel that's really been going on the entire 21st century. So that was good. Will Howard for the Steelers, another guy that I'm kind of keeping my eye on. He didn't play with a hand injury that he's been nursing. And then Riley Leonard for the Colts, 12 for 24, 92 yards and a pick, and also tacked on 34 rushing yards. Ended up probably playing a little more than they wanted him to, just because Anthony Richardson got hurt so early in that game. But between Richardson and Daniel Jones, neither of those quarterbacks have really proven to be a trustable starter for a 17-game stretch, so I really wouldn't be surprised to see Riley Leonard get some starts throughout the season here. Probably later down the season if the season doesn't go the way the Colts want it to. But he's definitely got some stuff to work with. He's not the most explosive, physically gifted quarterback ever, but was pretty important for the Notre Dame offense and definitely had some skills to work with in that Shane Steichen offense. And then just the last guy I know here, Cam Miller with the Raiders. Super efficient outing, 6 for 7 for 76 yards and a touchdown. A lot of that came on a 41-yard bomb that they scored on. But a really nice veteran-esque play where he hit the pump fake, got the defender out of position, then took the top off the defense. So I thought all those guys who played really showed some stuff. There were some other guys in there who didn't play super well. Late-round picks like Graham Mertz and Quinn Ewers showed a little bit more, but the guys who are more highly billed coming into the draft, I thought really showed out pretty well in their first outings. Number 3, I just want to talk about the Jets here. I thought they were really impressive, and obviously you don't want to get too carried away with just one preseason game, but Fields looked pretty solid. He scored that rushing touchdown, which is nothing new for him. He's a great athlete with great vision. Definitely seems to be developing a little bit as a passer, kind of those check down plays, kind of doing that quarterbacking that I was talking about earlier, where understanding where pressure's coming from, where the easy completions are, and getting the ball into the hands of your playmakers is super important for any NFL quarterback. And the big thing that I really like about the Jets is just the trenches, specifically the offensive line. I've talked about them a couple of times already. They've invested so many top-end picks into that group over the past couple of years. Most recently, Armand Membu, who they picked at the top of the draft this past season, played really well, I thought. And it reminded me of that DeMarco Murray Cowboys era where they had Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick and Zach Martin, and they were so successful reinvesting in the offensive line and making sure they had really productive players up there. So not saying that any of these Jets alignment are going to hit those borderline Hall of Fame levels, but I think the fact that they're really hammering home the offensive line is really important. And on the defensive side, they got Quentin Williams, who's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, and then Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, both high picks in recent years. Not the most physically imposing edge-setting players ever, but definitely super talented players who can get after the quarterback a little bit. So they're really building that team inside out. And like Dennis Allen in Chicago, I think Aaron Glenn's going to have a real aggressive tendency with that Jets defense that they're going to respond to. They have Sauce Gardner on the back end to kind of clean up a little bit, but I think there's going to be a lot of front seven pressure looks from the Jets. And I think they really have potential to be a playoff team. Looking at the AFC picture here, in the North, you got, I think, the Ravens and Bengals, one team wins the division and one team probably is the wild card team. Probably one team from the South, probably the Texans, maybe the Jaguars win that division. The Bills are penciled in playoff teams, same with the Chiefs. And then, pick one or two of the other AFC West teams between the Chargers, Broncos, and Raiders. But I think the Jets, if they can kind of hold water and play consistently throughout the year, they could be in the playoff picture looking down the stretch here. The big question I would say for them would be finding another pass catcher opposite of Garrett Wilson. They have Allen Lazard, Malachi Corley, the rookie tight end, Mason Taylor, and then Josh Reynolds at receiver. So if one of those guys can really step up and become a consistent number 2 passing option for Fields there, I think that's a group that could really make some waves and surprise some people this fall and maybe even sneak into the playoffs. Talking about one of those playoff teams for the number 4 note here, the Bengals really need to figure out this Trey Hendrickson situation. They played the Eagles. A bunch of the offensive starters played, a bunch of the defensive starters played. Eagles more rested a bunch of players, so Joe Burrow is already in midseason form with Jamar Chase. 2 touchdowns for Joe, 1 to Jamar, and 1 to the tight end Tanner Hudson. But it was really concerning to see Tanner McKee, that backup quarterback in Philly. He put up 20 completions in 25 attempts, 250 yards, and 2 touchdowns against what was basically the Bengals starting defense. Last season, Burrow was an MVP candidate despite the team missing the playoffs. He would have been the first person to win that award under those conditions since 1973. So just unheard of to have a player of that quality who is missing out in the postseason. So the defense needs to step up from last year. It'd be hard for them to get much worse, but Hendrickson's a big part of that. I mean, he led the league in sacks last year. He doesn't have a 10-year window in front of him, but they got to re-sign him and get him into camp and get him ready to go for the regular season because they just cannot afford to have a slow start like they have in recent years. The margin of error for them might be so small on defense that having a player like Hendrickson ready to go could end up being the difference maker between a team that misses the playoffs and a team that makes the playoffs and causes trouble for the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Bills and these top AFC teams. So you got to get that situation figured out and get the defense up to at least league average standard there. And then my number 5 final note here was about the kickoff rule. So they changed it again from last season. Last season, a touchback went to the 30-yard line, and now a touchback will have the offense starting at the 35-yard line. So they're really incentivizing teams from trying to return. I know we saw Trayvon Henderson with the Patriots return his first touch on the kickoff for a 100-yard touchdown. And I think teams are going to start to kind of invest more in that return position. With the Bears, you see them have Devin Duvernay in there, who was a great returner with the Ravens pretty recently. But it'll just be super important for teams to have a guy back there that they can trust with the ball in his hands, trust they won't put the ball on the ground, and maybe even get past the 35 and give the team really favorable starting field position. So it'll be interesting to see how those numbers kind of shake out. Obviously not a lot of consistent data from just 1 week of play in terms of how many more kicks are being returned, but definitely a big part of the game that they're trying to get in there. Obviously for Bears fans, you have Devin Hester back there, Cordell Patterson even. We all know that the return game can be one of the more exciting parts of the game. I think the NFL just wants to see more plays like that. And then the last note with the kickoff, they changed it so the onside kicks can now happen anytime in the game. So last year was fourth quarter only. Now you can do it anytime during the game, as long as the team kicking is actually trailing. So you can't be ahead and do a surprise onside kick, which makes sense. Some NFL injuries I just want to run through. So some pretty big players are kind of struggling here. Most recently, Landon Dickerson got a meniscus injury on his right knee on a Sunday practice. He was carted off, went to the facility. He's going to have a minor procedure and will be considered week to week moving forward, but a super important part for that Eagles offensive line that is really the heart and soul of that team. So if he's not available for the start of the season, that could be a little bit of a problem for the reigning Super Bowl champions. Going down to that Lions-Falcons game, safety Maurice Norris for the Lions had that really nasty injury. He's returned to the team and is in concussion protocol, but he was carted off, spent some time in hospital in Atlanta, and that was the game where the teams ended up just snapping the ball and letting the clock run out as to not play under that circumstance and under those emotions. So I thought both teams handled that really well. Obviously a super scary situation for Norris, and hope he can recover, and if not this year, still have a career out there. And then similar situation with Alexander Mattison, Dolphins running back. He had a neck injury in the fourth quarter of that Bears game, and they've ruled him out for the year. He actually had to have emergency surgery in Chicago. So definitely a super scary situation. Has been a pretty good player throughout his career, most notably for the Vikings. That's a scary injury, obviously, for a running back whose job is basically to take hits in the middle there. So hopefully he can come back. Matthew Stafford, another high-end player, that's a little bit of a question mark. Sean McVay had said that Monday he was slated to return to practice, and then on Monday came and went. He was in street clothes for practice. So I really like the Rams. I'm really bullish on them. I think they could win the NFC and dethrone the Eagles, but if Stafford's not healthy, that's probably not going to happen, even though they have a capable enough backup there in Jimmy Garoppolo. So definitely a situation to monitor with Stafford and the aggravated disc in his back. I know he's not a young guy, but getting him healthy for the regular season should be the most important part of the Rams preseason. They don't play starters too much in the preseason, but making sure that he can get some reps. Obviously, a veteran doesn't need too many looks to get ready for the season, but getting him ready for week 1 should be a total priority for them. And just a couple more here. Martin Emerson, Browns quarterback, is out for the season with an Achilles injury. Super unfortunate. Marlon Davidson, D tackle for the Texans, was placed on season-ending injury reserve. Actually, the second straight season that he's been placed on IR before the regular season. He had a torn bicep last year that kept him out for the entire year. In that Ravens-Colts game, 2 rookies, Bilal Cohn and Justin Wally, both ruled out for the season with a knee injury and ACL injury, respectively. Robert Jones, a guard for the Cowboys, who was competing to be that starting right guard, out for the season with a neck injury. And then wrapping up with Rashawn Slater, who we talked about last show, torn patellar in his left knee. Very serious injury for a left tackle who really needs to rely on that kick leg to get out and meet rushers in space. So just some writing on the wall. There were some reports about what guarantees he would still earn if he were not able to return to the field ever in his career. So hopefully we don't get to that point. I mean, truly one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL and just got paid like it. So he's definitely not going to play this year, but hopefully come 2026 we can see him back healthy. And then update on Brandon Ayuk with the Niners. Shanahan said that he's going to potentially return by week 6. So definitely not going to be ready for the start of the season after getting hurt in the latter part of the season last year. But a big part of that Niners offense, even more so after trading away Deebo Samuel. So hopefully they can get him back before too long. Moving on to the NL Central here. This really isn't even a race anymore at this point. The Cubs are now 6 games back of Milwaukee heading into Monday night. Milwaukee 17-4 since the All-Star break. That's the best record over that span in baseball, and the Cubs are 10-11 in that same area, which is the 13th best record. Definitely not terrible, but not the pace that they were on before the break. The Cubs are still 4.5 games in the lead for the wild card spot. They have the number 1 wild card spot right now in the NL, but they gotta get the offense going. But they did have it on Saturday when they scored 9 runs and 6 in the first 2 innings, but in the other 2 games on Friday and Sunday, they just could not get it going and ended up losing that series 2-1 to the Cardinals on the road. Cubs take on the Blue Jays starting Tuesday, and then the Brewers, like I said, playing Monday night against the Pirates. But then really it's going to be a big part of this race down the stretch is that 5-game, 4-day series starting next Monday between the 2 clubs. If the Cubs can win that series 3-2, 4-1, that could really put a dent in their race to win the division there. There's still a lot of questions remaining about why this team is struggling so much right now. A lot of it stems from the fact that your big hitters, Kyle Tucker, Seiya Suzuki, PCA, Michael Busch, Dansby Swanson are all kind of rut right now. Swanson, I just want to know, the way you get out of these ruts is by doing all the little things correct, and I think Swanson's done a great job of that, running it out to first base and trying to pick up little plays where he can. And you've seen that where, he creates chaos a little bit and can get on base where maybe he shouldn't have traditionally. But they got to do these little things right. Not every hit can be a home run. They got to play the small ball a little bit sometimes. But it's definitely frustrating to see just the consistency within the management. PCA had an off day a while back, and then they brought him in to pinch hit. And then on Sunday, 3-2, he's due up for the plate, and they end up pinch hitting Justin Turner. So if your young star is playing, have confidence in him and let him play. And if you pull him to give him a day off, give him the full day off. Don't go back and forth and mess with his psyche a little bit. So he's got to become a little less aggressive. He's so eager to swing, and it doesn't help sometimes when people are chanting for his name and everything. I get it. He's a young guy. He wants to make big plays, obviously, and wants to get out of his rut, but just swinging at everything is not going to help, and I think the books might be a little bit out on him right now. He's a really ambitious hitter who's going to swing out a lot of stuff, so he might need to recalibrate here. But bigger than concern for the Cubs is just the question marks around the Brewers. They're on an insane stretch, and I think it's a fair question to ask. Is this stretch sustainable for them? I would say no, just because statistically they're a little bit of an anomaly right now. Don't have the highest slug rate. They're not really hitting for power. They're getting wins on walk-offs and errors and just doing little things that kind of go their way. And eventually the ball is not going to bounce that way potentially. And some of these really close wins are going to turn into close losses, but you can't bank on a team just collapsing. You have to go out and win some games and try to catch up to them. So the only question, like I said, are they just peaking a little too early? It's great to be the best team in baseball in August, but that doesn't matter as much as being the best team in baseball in September and October. So there's still plenty of time for the Cubs to kind of get up and find a groove heading into the postseason. But definitely a little bit of a worrying situation. Despite some players showing some real flashes, Matt Shaw has been really hitting it here pretty recently, so that's a good sign. But like I said, you gotta get those top hitters kind of more involved in producing a little bit better on offense. And then my last note from this series, I know everyone's talking about this, but the kid ump at Busch Stadium was pretty annoying. It was kind of a perfect storm because over a 3-game series, there were 3 different broadcast teams between Marquee Sports Network, Fox, and then ESPN. So all those units wanted to get the wrong moment with the kid and for the social clips or whatever. But I don't need an interview every single day with the kid. I don't need to see him picture in picture as the Cubs are striking out and losing depressing games here. So I know he's getting a lot of hate on social media. I'm not going to go like that far and call him out, but definitely a little annoying. And I will say I was scrolling Instagram and I saw his account. I'm sure it was run by his dad or whoever got him set up to be in the alley there and right behind home plate. So just hope it's not like a Baby Gronk situation where it's a parent kind of trying to get their kid famous for nefarious reasons. But like I said, I'm not going to go crazy on the kid, but definitely a pretty frustrating aspect to see your team getting shelled a little bit. And they cut to like a 13-year-old kid calling balls and strikes and punch outs, and it was pretty irritating. I moved on down here to some NBA news. So schedule starting to leak out a little bit. We got the 2 opening night games. First up is the Rockets at the Thunder. That's going to be the ring ceremony for the Thunder after just winning the championship. Also important because KD signs with the Rockets and then is going to be in the building for that Thunder ring ceremony. Obviously, he couldn't ever win that ring in OKC. Not necessarily his fault, but that's a big storyline. So it'll be interesting to see him on that Rockets team. I really like that addition. I'm really high on them. They were a leadership piece and consistent playoff game closer away from potentially having a really good playoff team last year. And all those young guys for the Rockets just have another year of experience, and KD coming in could take them over the top to be a real Western Conference final team potentially. And that second game of the opening night, Warriors at Lakers, big storyline with Luka signing the extension, but then Steph versus LeBron, 2 players who highlighted this era of basketball and 2 players who probably don't have a whole lot more left in the tank, so you don't know how many matchups you're going to get between them anymore. So really intriguing opening night games. Got some looks at the NBA Cup brackets that start on Halloween there. So the one that I want to key on is that West B group that has the Mavericks, Lakers, Clippers, Pelicans, and Grizzlies. The big storyline, that's going to be the first game of the season that Luke is playing against the Mavericks, obviously the team that traded him away. So there'll be a lot of storylines there. And then Chris Paul with the Clippers on his swan song season, potentially playing the Pelicans. Those are the 2 teams that he really could find his career at, so it'll be cool for him to play NBA Cup, relatively meaningful basketball against his former team on his other former team. And the East brackets, not a whole lot to say other than the fact that you look at the East and there's not a lot of competitive teams. By the look of it, the Cavs and the Pacers could be potential final teams. They're in a bracket together. The Magic and the Pistons are in a bracket together, 2 competitive teams on the younger side. And then bracket C with the Knicks, Heat, and Bucks, 3 veteran teams who all have some problems. What does Milwaukee have around Giannis? Not much. What does Miami have in terms of superstar player talent? Not a lot outside of Bam Adebayo. And then the Knicks, they made it so far, but they move on from Tibbs, and they got a whole different coaching staff in there. So, not great teams come out of the East, so it'll be interesting to take all the NBA Cup and see who prevails from that conference. And then the Christmas Day lineup came out as well. Got Cavs at Knicks, Spurs at Thunder, Rockets at Lakers, Mavericks at Warriors, and T-Wolves at Nuggets. That Rockets-Lakers, KD, LeBron, like I said, you don't know how many times you're going to see these guys play against each other again. So Christmas Day, that's going to be super exciting. And then you can kind of get to the new age stars in that Spurs-Thunder game of Wembanyama versus Chet Holmgren and Shai, but obviously he'll be going against Chet Holmgren more, and those are kind of the 2 bigs coming up right now, so that'll be an interesting watch. Heading on down here to the first college football AP poll that released on Monday. So the first coaches poll released last Monday. A couple notable changes. Penn State and Ohio State swapped, so in the AP poll, Penn State's 2 and Ohio State's 3. Those were flipped in the coaches poll. Clemson moved up to 4 from 6. Ole Miss drops from 15 to 21. It's kind of the same. Tennessee drops from 18 to 24. Oklahoma actually goes up from the 26th ranked team in the coaches poll to 18 in the AP. And then BYU was the only team left out of the AP that was in the coaches poll. They're at 26. So pretty consistent grouping, just a couple adjustments here and there. And a few teams are like 1 or 2 seeds off. But Similar looks, we're starting to get a landscape of what the college football season is going to look like, and it's really going to start off hot. Texas, number 1 seed. It's actually the first time in team history that they're entering the season as number 1 seed, which is pretty crazy. But they're set to be the first one-ranked team since 1978 who's going to be underdog in their first game. They're playing Ohio State, the third-ranked team. That's a good rematch of the semifinal game from a season ago where Ohio State won 28-14, which is really a closer game than that. Javion Henderson had that 75-yard touchdown to cap off that first half, and then Texas was driving at the end of the game to potentially tie it up, and Jack Sawyer caused that strip sack and picked it up and ran 83 yards for a touchdown. So even though it was a 14-point game, it was really a couple plays away from being a tied game with almost no time left. So that'll be a great matchup. Obviously, some of those players have moved on, and both those quarterbacks from last year will be different. But whenever you get 1 versus 3 that early, that's super exciting. Some other big games early on, that Week 0 game in Dublin, which is kind of a tradition now, 22 Iowa State versus 17 Kansas State. It could have some pretty big implications in the Big 12 race. And then on that first Saturday of Week 1, you got number 9 LSU taking on number 4 Clemson. And then that following day on Sunday, you got number 6 Notre Dame at number 10 Miami. So we're going to hit the ground running in college football. Some pretty meaningful games early on that will definitely have playoff implications down the stretch. So it'll be great to get into that run as early as possible. And then moving on down to our media review here, I just finished up pretty recently the Cleveland show. Like many, I'm a big fan of Family Guy and American Dad, and so this was kind of the third piece of that, universe, world, whatever you want to say. Seth MacFarlane. My biggest takeaway was that the voice cast around the main characters is really strong. So he's kind of has like drinking buddies, and those are voiced by Jason Sudeikis and Seth MacFarlane, are two of the big guys. And then just some weird, not really expecting them to be in here. Will Forte plays the principal at the kids' school. Craig Robinson plays Cleveland's dad. Ariana Huffington, who's the co-founder of the Huffington Post, voices the wife of the bear character that Seth MacFarlane voices, which is interesting. She's not really a voice actor, but she actually is in a Family Guy episode when Brian goes on Bill Maher's show to promote his book, so they know each other somehow there. And then David Lynch as the bartender is another funny, not really a voice actor, but has such a distinct voice that you really hear him when he's on screen there. But overall, I thought it was a really fun show. It does a good job of being in that universe of those other shows while being its own separate entity. It's really about that blended family aspect where Cleveland has a son and then marries a new wife who has 2 kids, and they're trying to make it all work. I will say I'm a little embarrassed to admit that it took me a long time to realize that Cleveland Browns name is an allusion to the team. The Cleveland Browns, as a sports fan, should probably be on that a little better. But I watched all 4 seasons. It was unfortunately canceled after that. Even though I thought they were kind of hitting their stride and bringing in some new voice actors. Bryan Cranston had just joined on as the doctor and was going to join the crew of drinking buddies. So I thought it was really funny. I'm going to give it a 6.8 out of 10. Definitely a notch below Family Guy and American Dad, but definitely worth the watch. Some good absurdisms in there. A lot of typecast characters. So there's like the racist Southerner, and he's got a really overweight wife, and they're quirky. And then his buddies are all a little different. Where the Jason Sudeikis character is really short. The bear is obviously a bear, which is different. But yeah, funny show. Definitely worth the watch. And I do like how once they cancel it, they got Cleveland back into the Family Guy universe. So that's all I have for today. Big weekend in sports here. Obviously a big NFL weekend as that kind of gets going more and more here. Bears-wise, heading into the Bills week, we're going to hopefully see that some of the stars play a little bit more here, but just a reminder not to hit the panic button on any team in the first week or 2 of the preseason. So that's it for me, and I'll see you Friday. Thanks.